You need to be her donor. My uncle's words made the coffee cup freeze in my hand. I stood there, motionless, as conversations around the Sunday dinner table abruptly ceased. My mother's eyes darted nervously to my father, who suddenly became intensely interested in his napkin. Aunt Clara's fork clattered against her plate. The silence was deafening. What did you just say? I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Uncle Vincent, the self-appointed patriarch since my grandfather's death, leaned forward, his massive hands splayed on the table. Angela needs a liver transplant. You're the only match in the family. We're meeting with the doctors tomorrow at 6. My sister Angela sat at the far end of the table, eyes downcast, shoulders hunched. She didn't look surprised. None of them did. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They'd already discussed this. Planned it. Without me. I clutched the medical folder Uncle Vincent had tossed across the table. My name was on it. They'd already run preliminary tests using my old medical records. The room started spinning as I struggled to breathe. Sophia, my father began, his voice placating. We know it's a shock, but a shock. I cut him off, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. You've been planning to harvest my organs without even asking me first, and you call it a shock? I slammed the folder down and stood up, chair scraping loudly against the floor. As I headed for the door, Uncle Vincent's voice boomed behind me. Family takes care of family, Sophia. You can't just walk away from this. But that's exactly what I did. The cool Chicago air hit my face as I escaped onto the street, gulping it down like I was drowning. I fumbled for my phone, fingers trembling so badly I could barely dial. Chris? My voice cracked when my boyfriend answered. Can you come get me? Now? 20 minutes later, I sat in Chris's car, still shaking as I recounted what had happened. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. They can't force you to do this, he said firmly. It's your body, your choice. You don't understand how my family works, I replied, staring out the window as we drove through familiar neighborhoods that suddenly felt alien. In the Morelli family, there's no such thing as your choice when Uncle Vincent has decided something. Chris glanced over, concern etched across his face. What are you going to do? I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window. I don't know. That wasn't entirely true. I was an attorney. I knew my rights. Nobody could force me to donate part of my liver. But rights on paper and standing against the collective will of the Morelli family were two entirely different battles. My phone vibrated incessantly with messages and calls throughout the evening. I ignored them all except one, from my cousin Gina. Can I come over? Just to talk. No pressure, I promise. Gina had always been different from the rest of the family. More like me, questioning the old-world loyalties and obligations that governed our Italian-American clan. I trusted her, or at least I wanted to. You know they're freaking out, right? Gina said an hour later, sitting cross-legged on my couch, nursing a glass of wine. Good, I replied, refilling my own glass. They should be. Vincent's saying you've always been selfish. That you think you're better than everyone because you went to law school. I laughed bitterly. Of course he is. Meanwhile, Angela's on her third liver and still drinking, but I'm the problem. Gina's eyes widened. Third liver? What are you talking about? I froze, glass halfway to my lips. You didn't know? Know what, Sophia? I set my glass down carefully. Angela had a partial transplant 2 years ago. Dad was the donor. And before that, she had some experimental procedure in Europe. Neither worked long-term because she never stopped drinking. Gina looked genuinely shocked. They told everyone she had hepatitis from a blood transfusion after her car accident. That's the family line, I confirmed. But it's been alcohol all along. Since college. I walked to my home office and returned with a small lockbox. I found this when I was helping Mom clean out the guest room last year. Inside were medical records, letters from rehab facilities, and photographs, Angela at parties, drink in hand, dated after her first procedure. Evidence of a story very different from the one presented to the extended family. Jesus, Gina whispered, flipping through the documents. Does everyone know? Mom, Dad, Vincent. Probably Aunt Clara. I took a sharp breath. And now you. Gina looked up, her expression unreadable. Why are you showing me this? It was a fair question. One I wasn't entirely sure I had an answer to. Because I need someone else to know the truth, I finally said. Because I'm tired of carrying the secret while they paint me as the villain. Gina carefully replaced the papers in the box. What will you do? I don't know yet. But I'm not giving Angela part of my liver so she can destroy it too. After Gina left, I sat alone in my apartment, the lockbox open on the coffee table before me. Years of family secrets spread out like a morbid jigsaw puzzle. I picked up a photograph of Angela from Christmas 2 years ago, shortly after her first transplant. She was thin, her skin yellowish, but there was a recognizable cocktail in her hand. I remembered taking that picture myself, remembered the sick feeling in my stomach as I watched her drink, knowing what it was doing to her new liver, to part of our father. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom, * family meeting tomorrow, 7 p.m. at Vincent's. Please be there, Sophia. We need to discuss options, * options. As if I were just one item on a menu of possible solutions. I didn't respond. The next morning, I was in my office by 7, burying myself in case files to avoid thinking about my family. As a corporate attorney at Bergman & Associates, I had enough work to distract myself indefinitely. By noon, I had missed 17 calls from my parents, Vincent, various aunts and cousins. Even the family priest, Father Marco, had called, no doubt enlisted to appeal to my Catholic guilt. Your sister called twice, my assistant mentioned when she brought lunch to my office. Angela Morelli? She sounded upset. I nodded, keeping my eyes on my computer screen. Thanks, Jen. If she calls again, tell her I'm in meetings all day. Jen hesitated at the door. Everything okay? You seem off. Just family stuff, I said with a dismissive wave. Nothing I can't handle. But as the day wore on, I became increasingly aware that I couldn't hide in my office forever. At 6:30 p.m., I finally relented and checked my voicemails. Sophia, it's Dad. Please come tonight. We need to talk about Angela as a family. This is your uncle. Your behavior is unacceptable. Be at my house at 7. Hey, it's me. Angela. I know you're avoiding everyone. Just call me back, okay? Please? Angela's voice sounded small, fragile, so different from the sharp-tongued sister I'd grown up with. Despite everything, my heart twisted. The last message was from Gina. Sophia, don't come to Vincent's tonight. There's something you need to see first. Meet me at Murphy's bar at 6:45. I arrived at Murphy's 10 minutes late, scanning the dim interior until I spotted Gina in a back booth. She wasn't alone. Chris sat beside her, his expression grim. What's going on? I asked, sliding into the booth. Why is Chris here? Gina glanced around nervously before pulling out her phone. After I left your place last night, I couldn't stop thinking about what you showed me. So I did some digging. She passed her phone to me. On the screen was a medical report dated 2 weeks ago. Angela's name was at the top. How did you get this? I asked, skimming the document. I work in hospital administration, remember? Gina replied. I shouldn't have access, but, well, I do. As I read further, my stomach dropped. The report was clear. Angela was still actively drinking. Her current liver function was at critical levels. And most damning, she had been advised 6 months ago that she needed to be completely sober for at least a year before being considered for another transplant. She's known for months that this was coming, I whispered. Chris leaned forward. There's more. Show her the other thing. Gina swiped to another document. Bank records. My father had taken out a second mortgage on their house 3 months ago. The amount, $250,000. What is this for? I asked, though I was beginning to piece it together. There's a surgeon in China, Gina explained, her voice low. He does transplants, no questions asked. The family's been pooling money. They're planning to take you to Mexico this weekend, Chris added. For family healing after tonight's meeting. Once there, they think they can pressure you into agreeing. If not, he trailed off, looking at Gina. If not, Vincent has contacts who can get you across the border to China anyway, she finished, not meeting my eyes. They're desperate, Sophia. I felt like I'd been plunged into ice water. Are you saying they're planning to coerce me into surgery? They would never call it that, Gina said. In their minds, they're saving Angela. And you're the only option left. How do you know all this? I demanded, suddenly suspicious. Gina looked down. Because they asked me to help. To convince you to come willingly. And instead you're warning me. It wasn't a question. You showed me the truth, she said simply. I couldn't be part of this. I sat back, trying to process everything. My family, people who should love me unconditionally, were plotting to essentially traffic me for my organs. What do I do? I whispered. Chris squeezed my hand. We get you somewhere safe tonight. I can't just disappear, I argued. My phone lit up with a series of messages, a coordinated bombardment. From my father. Sophia, where are you? Vincent is furious. Angela's asking for you. From Uncle Vincent. 1 hour to get here, or we start calling the partners at your firm. From my mother. Your sister is dying. Whatever happens is on your conscience. From Aunt Clara. Is your career worth your sister's life? What kind of person have you become? Each message targeted my weaknesses. Guilt, career anxiety, family loyalty, my need for approval. They're not going to stop, I said, a strange calm settling over me. And neither am I. Then don't disappear, Gina suggested. Go to Vincent's. Confront them. But not alone. That's how, at 7:30 p.m., I found myself in my uncle's opulent living room, facing down the entire Morelli clan. Chris stood beside me. Gina hovered by the door. You're late, Vincent growled from his armchair throne. And you brought outsiders to family business. Chris isn't an outsider, I replied. And this stopped being family business when you started plotting behind my back. Vincent's eyes narrowed. Your sister is dying while you play detective. My father stepped forward, desperate. Sophia, please. Angela needs you. Where is she? I asked, scanning the room. Upstairs, resting, my mother answered quickly. I noticed several family members exchange glances. Something wasn't right. I want to see her, I stated firmly. Vincent waved dismissively. After we discussed the arrangements. No arrangements until I see Angela, I insisted. She's sleeping, Aunt Clara interjected. Poor thing is exhausted. Chris shifted closer to me. Let's be clear. Sophia isn't agreeing to anything tonight. Vincent rose slowly, his imposing figure looming over us. This doesn't concern you, he said to Chris, then to me. You brought him here to protect you from your own family? Apparently I need protection, I shot back. Angela sat on the couch, looking pale and thin. Our parents flanked her protectively. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins created a semicircle around the room. Father Marco stood awkwardly by the fireplace, clearly uncomfortable with his role in this drama. No one is plotting anything, my father said, his voice strained. We just want to discuss options for helping your sister. I pulled Gina's phone from my pocket and held it up. Options like taking me to Mexico under false pretenses? Or arranging an illegal transplant in China if I refuse. The room went deathly quiet. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Vincent's face darkened dangerously. Who told you that? He demanded, rising from his chair. I ignored the question. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I'd just blindly walk into your trap? It's not a trap, my mother pleaded. We're trying to save Angela's life. By sacrificing mine? I shot back. By keeping the truth from everyone that she's still drinking? That she's been told explicitly she's not a transplant candidate because of it. Angela flinched as if I'd struck her. That's not true, she whispered. I turned to face her directly, pulling the medical report from my pocket and holding it up. Isn't it? Patient continues to show markers of active alcohol use. Patient advised minimum 12 months sobriety required before transplant consideration. This is dated 2 weeks ago, Angela. Where did you get that? My father demanded, moving to snatch the paper. I stepped back, keeping it out of his reach. It doesn't matter where I got it, I said. What matters is that you've all been lying. To the family, to each other, maybe even to yourselves. Angela needs help. Real help. Not another liver to destroy. You ungrateful bitch, Vincent spat, taking a threatening step toward me. Chris immediately moved between us. After everything this family has done for you, what exactly has this family done for me, Uncle Vincent? I interrupted, my voice rising. I put myself through law school while you all focused on saving Angela. I built my career without help from any of you. I've loaned money when asked, shown up to every family event, kept your secrets for years. And this is how you repay me? By conspiring to harvest my organs. The room erupted into chaos, denials, accusations, tears. My mother wept openly. My father looked stunned, as if he couldn't comprehend how his plan had unraveled. Angela just stared at the floor, silent tears tracking down her hollowed cheeks. Father Marco finally stepped forward, hands raised. Please, everyone, calm down. This isn't the way to resolve anything. There's nothing to resolve, I said firmly. I will not be donating part of my liver to Angela. Not now, not in Mexico, not ever, not while she's still drinking. Vincent slammed his fist on an end table, making everyone jump. You don't get to make that decision. This is about family. No, I replied, surprisingly calm in the face of his rage. This is about control. It always has been. I turned to Angela. I love you. You're my sister. But I won't enable your destruction anymore. None of us should. Her eyes finally met mine, filled with a mixture of shame and defiance. You've always been perfect, haven't you? She said bitterly. Never needed anyone, never made a mistake. I'm far from perfect, I answered. But I've faced my problems instead of drowning them. And I've never expected someone else to sacrifice their body to fix my mistakes. I placed the lockbox on the coffee table and opened it, revealing years of evidence I'd gathered. This is the truth. Angela's drinking history, previous failed transplants, rehab attempts. I'm leaving it here because I'm done carrying the secret. Vincent lunged forward, slamming the box shut. You will not bring shame on this family. The shame isn't in the truth, I said. It's in the lies. He grabbed my arm. Chris moved forward instantly, breaking Vincent's grip. The room erupted into chaos. Shouting, crying, accusations. Stop it. The voice came from the doorway, Angela, leaning against the frame, looking deathly ill. Just stop. Everyone froze. My mother rushed to Angela's side. Angela looked at me, her eyes hollow. They didn't tell me, Sophia, about their plans. I swear. Another lie unraveled. They'd been keeping Angela in the dark too. Of course they didn't, I said softly. They're protecting you, like always. Vincent recovered, turning to Angela. This doesn't change anything. You still need a transplant. It changes everything, I countered. You're not just asking for part of my liver. You're asking me to participate in a lie that's killing my sister. Vincent's face flushed dark with fury. Either she helps Angela, or she's no longer part of this family. The ultimatum hung in the air like a guillotine blade. I'm willing to help Angela get real treatment, I said firmly. I'll even help pay for it. But I will not give her part of my liver while she's actively drinking. And if anyone tries to force me... I paused. Well, I'm a lawyer. I know exactly how to protect myself. With that, I turned and walked toward the door, Chris beside me. No one moved to stop us. Sophia, my mother called, her voice breaking. Please don't do this. She's your sister. I paused at the threshold. Yes, she is. That's why I'm doing this, because someone in this family needs to stop the cycle of enablement before it kills her. The drive home was silent. Chris knew better than to fill the space with empty reassurances. When we reached my apartment, I just sat in the passenger seat, unable to make myself move. What now? I finally asked. Now we make sure you're safe, he replied. I've already called my buddy at the 21st precinct. He knows what's going on. Vincent won't try anything with the police watching. I nodded, too emotionally drained to argue. Will you stay tonight? I don't want to be alone. Of course. That night, I finally broke down in my apartment. I cried for the family I thought I had, for my sister I couldn't save, for the betrayal cutting deeper than I'd imagined possible. I was jolted awake at 3 a.m. by pounding on my door. It was Aunt Clara, her face streaked with tears. "Vincent's taken Angela," she sobbed. "He's driving her to Mexico himself. Said he couldn't wait for you to come to your senses." My blood ran cold. "When did they leave?" "About an hour ago. Your parents tried to stop him, but—" She shook her head helplessly. I grabbed my phone, calling Angela's number. Straight to voicemail. "Vincent's too." "This is insane," Chris said, emerging from the guest room. "She's not stable enough for that travel." I called my father next. He answered immediately, his voice frantic. "Sophia, Vincent's lost his mind. We're following them, already past Indianapolis." "Call Highway Patrol," I instructed. "Report Vincent for reckless endangerment of a vulnerable adult. I'll contact hospitals along their route." "He'll never forgive us," my father said quietly. "Better an angry Vincent than a dead Angela," I replied. 3 frantic hours later, my phone rang. It was Gina. "Angela's in the hospital," she said without preamble. "She collapsed at a gas station outside Louisville." "It's bad, Sophia." Despite everything, I found myself rushing to Northwestern Memorial an hour later. The ICU waiting room was filled with Morellis, all of whom fell silent when I appeared. My mother's eyes were red and swollen. My father looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. "What happened?" I asked, addressing no one in particular. "Liver failure," my father replied flatly. "They don't think she'll last the week without a transplant." The unspoken request hung in the air between us. I ignored it. "Can I see her?" After a moment's hesitation, my mother nodded. Room 507. "They're letting family in 2 at a time." The hospital corridor stretched before me like a gauntlet. Each step toward Angela's room felt heavier than the last. When I finally pushed open the door, the sight of her nearly brought me to my knees. Angela lay connected to various machines, her skin a sickly yellow, her body seemingly swallowed by the hospital bed. She looked so small, so fragile, nothing like the vibrant, charismatic sister who had always commanded attention. "Hey," I said softly, approaching the bed. Her eyes fluttered open. "You came," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Of course I came." To gloat. A hint of the old Angela sparked in her eyes. I shook my head, taking a seat beside her. To see my sister. We sat in silence for a long moment, the beeping of monitors the only sound. "I'm dying, Soph," she finally said. "For real this time." "I know. Will you do it? The transplant?" Her eyes searched mine, desperate yet knowing. I reached for her hand, careful of the 4. "No, Angie, I won't." She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I don't blame you." Her admission startled me. I had expected anger, manipulation, the usual Angela tactics. Not this quiet acceptance. "I wouldn't give me my liver either," she continued, her words slurring slightly from medication. "I'd just ruin it like I've ruined everything else." "Angela, it's true," she interrupted. "I know what I am. What I've done. To myself, to the family. To you." She squeezed my hand weakly. "I'm sorry, Sophia. For everything." I felt tears welling in my eyes. "Why couldn't you stop? After the first transplant, after Dad gave you part of his liver, why keep drinking?" She stared at the ceiling. "I don't know. I told myself each time would be the last. That I could control it." A bitter smile twisted her lips. Turns out alcoholics are really good liars, especially to themselves. The honesty was disarming. For perhaps the first time in our adult lives, Angela wasn't hiding behind excuses or deflections. "What can I do?" I asked. "Not the transplant, but something else." "Anything else?" She turned to look at me, her gaze clearer than I'd seen in years. "Forgive me? Eventually, I mean. Not now, I haven't earned it yet. But someday." I leaned forward and pressed my forehead to hers, tears flowing freely now. "I forgive you now," I whispered. "I love you, Angie. I always have. Even when I was the worst sister in the world? Even then." She managed a small laugh that turned into a cough. "Will you stay?" Just for a little while. I nodded, settling into the chair beside her bed. We talked for hours, really talked, without pretense or family politics between us. About childhood memories, regrets, dreams neither of us had achieved. When she finally drifted to sleep, I remained, watching the rise and fall of her chest. A soft knock at the door made me look up. Father Marco stood in the doorway, his expression solemn. "May I come in?" he asked. I nodded, too emotionally spent to refuse. He took the chair opposite me, studying Angela's sleeping form. "The family is in shambles," he said after a moment. "I know. Vincent is talking about disowning you." I almost laughed. "Of course he is." Father Marco sighed heavily. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Angela needs to face her demons, not cover them with another temporary solution." His support surprised me. "Does the rest of the family know you feel this way?" "I've made my position clear," he replied. "Some are starting to understand. Your parents, they're caught between their children. It's an impossible position." "They made their choice a long time ago," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Angela was always the one who needed saving. And now you're saving yourself," he observed. "There's courage in that, Sophia. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." When he left, I returned my attention to Angela. Whatever happened next, I knew things would never be the same. The Morelli family would either fracture completely or rebuild on a foundation of truth instead of secrets and manipulation. Either way, I would no longer be the compliant daughter, the reliable backup plan, the safety net always ready to catch everyone else. 3 days later, Angela was transferred to a specialized liver unit in Cleveland. I helped arrange it, using my connections at work to expedite the process. She wouldn't get a transplant. Her condition made her ineligible, but they had experimental treatments that might buy her time. "Enough time to get sober?" she asked as we waited for the helicopter transport. "That's up to you," I replied honestly. She nodded, accepting the truth in a way she never had before. "If I make it a year," she said, "will you reconsider?" "The transplant, I mean." I took her hand. "One day at a time, Angie. Let's start there." After she was gone, I returned to my apartment to find my parents waiting outside my door. My mother stepped forward immediately, arms outstretched, but I took a step back. "Not yet," I said quietly. "I need time." My father nodded, his expression resigned. "We understand. We just wanted to say, thank you for helping with Cleveland. I did it for Angela, not for you." "We know that too," my mother said, her voice small. "We've made so many mistakes, Sophia. Terrible mistakes." "Yes," I agreed. "You have." There was nothing more to say. They left without further attempt at reconciliation, understanding, perhaps for the first time, that forgiveness had to be earned, not demanded. That evening, I sat on my balcony overlooking the Chicago skyline, a glass of wine in hand. Chris had texted to check on me, but I needed this moment alone. To process, to grieve, to begin healing. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from my firm's London office. They were looking for someone to head their new international division. 6 months minimum, possibly permanent. The opportunity I'd been waiting for, arriving at exactly the right moment. I tapped out a quick response expressing interest, then turned back to the glittering city spread before me. The Morelli family had always been a house of cards, elaborate, impressive from the outside, but fundamentally unstable. It had finally collapsed under the weight of its own secrets. Yet from the wreckage, something honest might emerge. Something real. Whether I would be part of that reconstruction remained to be seen. I raised my glass to the night sky. To freedom, I whispered. To truth. To finally putting myself first. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, dealing with Vincent's rage, navigating the fractured family dynamics, pursuing the London opportunity. But tonight, in this moment, I had peace. The peace of knowing I had stood my ground, had refused to be sacrificed on the altar of family obligation. Some would call it selfish. Others, self-preservation. I called it necessary. Was I wrong to refuse my sister? To potentially let her die rather than risk my own health? Or was standing firm the only way to finally break the cycle of enablement that had brought us all to this point? I didn't know if there was a right answer, only that I had finally made my own choice instead of the one dictated to me. And in that choice, painful as it was, I had finally found my voice.